everybody. Welcome back to Crime Weekly. I'm Stephanie Harlow.
And I'm Derek Levasseur.
So today we're picking up with part 2 of the JC McGhee case. I'm going to give you a quick rundown on what we already covered. On the morning of July 11th, 2002, 16-year-old Alyssa McGhee called 911 reporting that her father, JC McGhee, had been shot inside their home. Just minutes later, JC's nephew, who lived next door, Omar Foston, made his own frantic 911 call, claiming that 4 men had broken into his house, tied up his mother Pearl and his girlfriend Kim Smith, and held them hostage. When police arrived, they found JC McGhee dead from a gunshot wound and Omar's home ransacked. Pearl and Kim told investigators that the intruders were armed, dressed in black, and demanding money and drugs. Both women were tied up, beaten, and doused in rubbing alcohol, while the men threatened to set them on fire. Because their faces were covered, they didn't see much of what happened to Omar, but they could hear him being beaten and taken outside, and moments later, they heard a gunshot. That's when Kim was able to free herself, hit the panic button in the kitchen, which called the police, and this was just as the attackers fled, allegedly. Now, despite the brutality of the attack, neither Pearl nor Kim could explain why their home had been targeted. We talked about this last episode.
Yeah.
Pearl was like, hey, we don't have money. We don't live in like a wealthy neighborhood. Why us? Even though she had $2,000 in a suitcase from a recent vacation. Why would we be the target of this home invasion? Well, my question to Pearl would be, why do you have a panic button in your kitchen if you didn't kind of suspect something like this might happen? But Pearl and Kim, their stories remained mostly the same throughout multiple interviews. We know that Pearl initially told police that there had been one person in her room with Omar when she woke up, and this person was holding a gun to Omar's head. And then later she told the police that there was actually 2 individuals in the room with Omar. One was holding a gun on him, one was holding a gun on her. But other than that, their stories remained mostly the same throughout multiple interviews. However, the same cannot be said for Omar. And as we'll talk about in this episode, his version of events kept changing, raising more questions than answers about what really happened that morning.
Yeah. And we did have the opportunity, after discussing episode 1 and talking about it and going back and forth, we did have the opportunity to hop on the phone with Madison and give her kind of our opinions after episode 1. And she was in agreement with basically everything we said. I talked about the fact that you and I had brought up JC's security system, Pearl's security system, the panic button, the money in the suitcase. And Madison basically said, yeah, it's all warranted. My dad was a CI. He was a drug dealer. That's what he was known for. And it's very possible that could be what happened here. But we also talked about the idea that Omar was in on something more and that this was a potential murder disguised as
a setup,
a setup, basically disguised as, you know, a home invasion that went wrong. And that's what was really going on here. Her dad was the target based on something deeper than just drugs. And we already talked about that. We agreed on it, but she's very open to it. She says it right out. She's not trying to hide anything. She's like, listen, call it how you see it. I know what's happening here. And she also obviously agrees that her dad still deserves justice. And that's what we're here trying to do. So I appreciate Madison being so open about potential scenarios, because I do find sometimes that whenever I discuss a victim and I bring up anything that could paint them in a negative light, there is some pushback.
Awkward.
There is some pushback sometimes by the family members. And I understand that, but I always just try to push back by saying, hey, listen, sometimes you have to ask the difficult questions if you really want to get to the truth. And they may not always paint your loved one in a positive light. It doesn't cheapen what happened to them. But if you really want to know what happened, we got to go there. And I love the fact that Madison's willing to do that. And she's beaten us to that punch multiple times, which is why I mentioned the first one, and I'll mention it here as well. Go check out Madison's podcast, Ice Cold Case. It's entirely about her father's murder. And she's breaking it all down. She's doing interviews with people. Again, this is something personal to her, but I do respect her objectivity in this case. She's been very straightforward with us. She's very straightforward in the podcast. I went and listened to some of it. It's very good. Go check it out, and it'll give you a lot more detail, a lot more insight on this investigation if that's what you're looking for.
I think also most people understand that there's no such thing as a perfect victim, because there's no such thing as a perfect human being. And honestly, there can be a stigma sometimes around true crime where we have to make the victims look like these honorable, amazing people in order to, I guess, tell their story and show that what happened to them was wrong. But in general, like I said, not any one of us is perfect. We've all done things we're not proud of. We've all done things that were wrong. We've all intentionally or unintentionally hurt people. And so to leave these things out, this is very important context. And sometimes it's going to deter from having a full sense of the case when you're trying to paint or portray the victim as this perfect victim, because there is no perfect victim. And so I think that's very important to be aware of. Yeah.
Couple final house cleaning questions that I had. We do not know, Madison does not know if there was a peephole on JC's door. Wouldn't really be relevant here because we don't believe that JC got to the door, and we know that the door was kicked in. But I just wanted to point it out there because it was a question I had in episode 1. Unsure if there was a peephole. And then also another thing that I wanted to ask her was the distance between the two homes. And she wasn't 100% sure. She did say that the house burned down since then, so you can't even go look now.
Oh, wow.
But she said it was relatively close. They were next door neighbors. The houses you're not sitting on top of each other, but it's basically 1 yard away. So you're talking 15 to 25 feet max between the two houses. Very accessible for someone to run next door if it was a drug operation where, hey, listen, I need to go grab more product. I can go do that. Or in this case, if these offenders are real, very easy to go in one house and then transfer to the next one.
So let's talk about what Omar said to the police and how his story changed. In his first interview, Omar told the police that as he and Kim sat in the living room watching TV in the early hours of July 11th, he heard something shatter, and then he saw 3 black men enter the house. They came through the front door, all armed with guns, and as soon as Omar got up, they put their weapons to his head, and Omar said that he could see a 4th man outside acting as a lookout. Now, according to Omar, the men ordered him to go to his mother's room and wake her up. Then they dragged Pearl out of the bed and forced her into the living room where she was placed next to Kim. They made Omar lie on the ground, they pistol whipped him, and at some point they put a pillowcase over his head and tied him up. Then they asked if he worked, and when he said no, that he was in college, they accused him of lying and kicked him again. When they went over to his computer and saw evidence that he was in school, one of the men allegedly said, quote, "Now I know where you go to school," end quote. Omar said after that, they grabbed a bottle of rubbing alcohol, poured it over him, and threatened to burn him alive. Then one of the men forced him outside at gunpoint, made him get on his knees, and held him there before bringing him back inside.
Totally makes sense, right?
That makes no sense.
Makes total sense. Stephanie, why wouldn't you execute someone on the front lawn?
Well, then not do it and bring him back inside.
Right? Like, I'm going to bring you out there. And this is really, if you're trying to get information out of me, bring me outside where basically people could be driving by.
Exactly.
And you're holding a gun to my head, and I'm going to threaten to execute you. And the fact that I brought you outside is going to be the reason you finally give me all the information I need.
And like, I get it. Like, maybe they forced him to his knees and try to scare him to think that they were going to shoot him. But you wouldn't bring him outside where the neighbors going out to get their morning paper can see that.
Here's a better idea. Everyone's seen the movies. You take the blanket off Omar's mother. You put the gun to her head while she's on her knees. If he ain't going to talk for that, he ain't talking for anybody. I'm not saying that to give anybody ideas, but that's what I'm talking about. What we're saying in this scenario, bringing him outside away from his mom and his girlfriend to a public street at 7 o'clock in the morning. I know criminals are dumb, but this is extremely dumb.
It doesn't make any sense.
Nope.
Okay, so they have him inside, allegedly put a pillowcase over his head. We got this bottle of rubbing alcohol. Again, is rubbing alcohol like super flammable, by the way?
Yes.
Is it?
Yes.
Is it like more flammable than gasoline?
I think it's about the same, probably. I mean, gasoline's probably a little bit more, but alcohol, yeah. I mean, you light a match on a cup of alcohol. Watch what happens.
Not going to do that.
Yeah.
But okay, so they got the rubbing alcohol.
You ever see rubbing alcohol that says extremely flammable? You know?
Yeah, I don't know.
Okay.
I don't read bottles.
Let's
I have bad vision. I have bad
Stephanie,
vision.
douse yourself with alcohol. Let's see if you.
I'm not going to do it.
Let's see what happens.
No, I'm not going to do it. They bring him outside, force him to his knees, and then they're like, get back up. We're going inside. Bring him back inside. Once they're back in the house, they kicked him in the face. They ordered him to lie down again before continuing to ransack the home. Then at one point, the men went outside. And this is when Omar claims he managed to free himself and run outside. Once again, how is Omar tied up, right? They said that they made him lie on the ground. They pistol whipped him. At some point, they put a pillowcase over his head and tied him up. What did they tie him up with? Because Pearl, his mother, and Kim, his girlfriend, were tied up with telephone cords, which seems like the best instrument to use to tie people up. But what was Omar tied up with, right? And also, when the police got there, Pearl and Kim had marks on their wrists. Did Omar? So this is when he manages to get free and run outside. He claims when he ran outside, he saw a black van with a white or silver stripe on the side. He then ran towards Break and Block, which was a local automotive business. And as he did, the men fired shots at him. And when he got inside, he told the employees to call 911. So maybe this is what Pearl heard, like a shot. And then she heard Omar yell, "You didn't get me." But how would she have heard that when he ran out of the house and was running to a business? And wouldn't there have been multiple shots fired, not just one? And did police recover bullets or casings from outside the house on Omar's journey from the house to Break and Block?
This is what makes me believe, by the way, that these guys are real. I don't think there's a scenario where Omar's just making this all up.
Oh, no, I don't either.
And none of it happened. There were definitely other people there.
Mm-hmm.
And they probably recovered some forensic evidence to support that. Even this gunshot where they could have found a shell casing or something. I think it's all real. I think it all happened. The question is under what pretenses? Did they fire the gun in the air, nowhere in the direction of Omar as he was running away? That could also be true.
Did he fire a gun and just yell out, "Oh, you missed me"?
Exactly. Was that all theatrics? Was it all to create an illusion for the people that were inside so that they would feel that it was real enough to corroborate the story later? I mean, you have to remember, I don't know the relationship that Pearl had with JC, but they were brother and sister.
They were, yeah.
So it's very possible if their relationship was good, she would not have been on board with this. And Omar had to create the illusion for her as well.
So when I said last episode that I believe Pearl, if there was some illegal drug activity going on in JC's house or her house or both, I believe she knew about that.
Yes.
But I don't believe that she necessarily knew that her brother was about to be murdered.
I would agree with that as well. And even talking to Madison from our conversation, it doesn't sound like she believes that either. Madison did tell us that she interviewed Pearl much later. And she said right out that based on her interview, she believes that Pearl believes what happened at that time when she interviewed her, that was her reality. Her house was being robbed. That was Madison's opinion of that interview. So, yeah, I agree with you. I think Pearl, whatever the actual circumstances were, believed in that moment that her life was in danger.
And also, if you're running to safety and people are shooting at you, and they're shooting at you and they don't hit you, but you'd be like, "Ha ha ha, you guys missed," and give them verbally and audibly with your voice a sense of where you were, it
sounds cartoony, but I could see that happening actually.
Like someone's shooting at you. If they hit you, you're going to die. And you're like, "It can't catch me. I'm the gingerbread man."
Well,
What?
if we're to believe that he was mouthing off to them the entire time because of a lack of medication, I mean, it wouldn't be the craziest thing.
Yes, I guess.
Right? I mean, he's thinking he's like a gangster. He's in this moment and I don't know, he's a tough guy. But that's all based on the belief that everything we're hearing is exactly what it is. And I do want to go back and forth throughout this episode and qualify it by saying we're given a scenario where Omar's in on the whole thing. Omar knows exactly what's going down. There is also a scenario where Omar and JC and maybe Pearl, maybe not, are involved in something. And this was actually a home invasion where it was a collaborative effort amongst a group of people. And there was a lookout and they were going to try and steal the money and the drugs. And unfortunately, the person who entered JC's house was a lot more trigger happy than the three that entered Omar's house. And maybe when that guy goes in there, he gets spooked, thinks that JC has something in his hand and shoots him. And I don't even know if it was an intentional shot to hit him like that because it's such a tough shot to make. it almost seems like it was lucky. Maybe the guy just turns around and fires around and is running away and unfortunately hits JC in the head. So I'm not sitting here telling you about Omar, completely disputing or discrediting the notion or the idea that this is exactly what Omar's describing, in a home invasion that went wrong.
Okay, so I don't believe that it was just an accidental shot. I think they sent somebody there that they knew could make that shot.
Yeah.
And why would this person have intentionally kicked in? I mean, they just went in the house next door, managed to restrain and tie up 3 people, and now you just have one unarmed man approaching the door, and you're going to shoot? Why?
Yeah. It's a great question. Let's take a break. We'll be right back.
This episode is brought to you by IQBAR, our exclusive snack sponsor. IQBAR is the better-for-you, plant protein-based snacks made with brain-boosting nutrients to refuel, nourish, and satisfy hunger without the sugar crash. IQBAR's plant protein bars are packed with high-quality ingredients to help keep you physically and mentally fit. And not only are IQ bars amazing for your health, but I can personally attest to it because I eat at least 3 or 4 of these a day. They taste amazing. All right, so they come in 9 delicious flavors. That includes mint chocolate chip, which is amazing for the chocolate lovers. Chocolate sea salt's really good too. Banana nut, amazing. Toasted coconut chip, lemon blueberry, and peanut butter chip. So with over 20,000 5-star reviews and counting, more people than ever are starting their days on the right foot with IQ Bar's brain and body boosting bars, hydration mixes, and mushroom coffees. I have made so many IQ Bar converts. It's not even funny. And when IQ Bar sent me initially their ultimate sampler pack, one flavor stood out to me immediately. For me, peanut butter chip is always going to reign supreme. We are going to give you a great deal. Derek's going to tell you about that right now.
Literally eating one right now, not for this ad, but because we're bulk recording today. We're starting a second episode, so I wanted to have a little snack. That's what I'm eating. And right now, IQ Bar is offering our special podcast listeners and viewers 20% off all IQ Bar products, plus get free shipping. To get your 20% off, just text weekly to 64,000. Once again, text weekly to 64,000. One more time, text weekly to 64,000. Message and data rates may apply. See terms for details. All right, we're back. And I'm with you. But here's the thing. So if this was an intentional shot, I'm posing this question to you, Steph. If this is an intentional shot, then that means this was a premeditated murder because the guy never went in the apartment afterwards. They took off, which would suggest that this was a ruse. This wasn't a real home invasion. There's more to the story than we know. If it was an unintentional shot, the question becomes, why did he run away? You could answer that by saying, oh shit, he didn't intend on killing him. When he realized what he did, instead of going for the drugs and the money that may potentially be in JC's house, the offender fled the area. Maybe that's why they didn't go inside.
Why wouldn't they have fled the area when they were shooting at Omar outside?
It's almost like they want us to believe that was simultaneous, right? Like as Omar was escaping, team number 2 was in JC's house. That's what's so hard about this story to believe.
Mm-hmm.
Think about what has to happen there. Basically, it's a shootout going on in the middle of the street. This
like suburban
residential
neighborhood,
area.
yeah.
and there's no witnesses. Nobody saw anything or heard anything.
Yeah.
And also, I want to add this. It's kind of odd that Alyssa didn't hear those shots, right? We didn't talk about that, but she heard the pop inside the house. You would think she would have heard, even if she didn't see the getaway van, she would have said, yeah, when I got up, they were shooting at me because according to Omar, they're shooting at him. He gets to the business. He tells the employees what's going on. He tells them to call 911. So this is minutes after JC would have been shot. So you would think Alyssa at minimum would have heard the other shots intended for Omar.
And that's what I'm saying. Pearl only heard one shot. Kim only heard one shot. Alyssa only heard one shot.
Didn't Pearl say she heard the shot where Omar's like, you didn't get me?
Yeah, but
it could have been the shot for JC is what you're saying.
Yes, so she still only heard one shot.
Interesting. I gotcha.
So where's all these like gunslinging battles happening that nobody can hear because everybody only heard one gunshot?
Right. So what you're saying is if the shot was intended for JC and Omar's present, he yells out, you didn't get me, to again build that narrative that he's a victim as well to not only law enforcement, but more importantly to his mom, to Kim, to anybody else who may hear it, because they're going to be his alibi later.
Yeah, but I mean, I still have a hard time believing that Kim would have heard Omar yell out, "You didn't get me," unless Omar, while the guys were going to the house next door, stood directly outside Pearl's house and yelled, "You didn't get me," when he heard the shot.
Yeah, it's very confusing.
Yes.
The whole thing is hard to believe if you just take it at what Omar and everyone wants us to believe happened. It's just a
Quite
really
hard.
convoluted story.
So in the interview with Omar, investigators, like us, spent a lot of time trying to understand Omar's story. They asked if he knew the men, and he said he didn't. Now, this obviously contradicted what he had told the 911 dispatcher. If you recall from part 1, when the dispatcher asked if he knew the attackers, Omar said yes, and that they were from California. When investigators asked about his change of story, Omar explained that he didn't know them personally, but he knew they were from California because they said so. Because, that's what they're going to do. They're going to be like, "We're here robbing you with guns. And here, we're from California, by the way. And this is the name of our gang."
They also gave their social security numbers, just in case.
Yeah, and this is the name of our gang, okay? That's Tone over there.
Yep.
And we're from California. They're giving all of these identifying details that, honestly, if they were legit criminals from some gang, they probably wouldn't be doing that.
No, I agree.
Investigators had a lot of other questions, like why would a group of armed men suddenly show up at Omar's house demanding drugs and money? How would they know his mother lived there too? And why would they leave his house and go straight to JC's home to kill him when JC had no apparent connection to what was happening at Omar's? He wasn't the one who could identify the robbers. Omar, Pearl, and Kim were, yet they were still all alive. Omar said he had no idea why they had targeted his home. He didn't have drugs or money. He insisted that he wasn't involved in drugs at all, which was hard to believe considering that during their search, police found 3 cannabis plants in his driveway. On top of that, one of the interviewing detectives knew a CI recently purchased drugs from Omar.
There you go.
They knew for a fact that he was lying about this part.
There you go. Yep. There you go. And that just reinstills our belief that there's more than meets the eye.
So Omar's lying about drugs, and here's the thing. And you could say, well, if he knew this was going to happen, why wouldn't he have gotten rid of the cannabis plants? Well, this is my perspective on it, okay? I think that he, in my opinion, did know what was going to happen, so he got rid of all the drugs in the house. But cannabis plants are strange because a lot of seeds come off of them. And sometimes, even if you pull up all the ones that are there, you'll have like stray ones growing that you didn't know about because they pollinate. The seeds blow or they get carried by insects or animals, and then they start growing. It's a very hardy plant. It will grow. And so I think he just didn't know those 3 plants were there. I don't know if they were in the ground or if they were sitting in pots in his driveway, but either way. And he might have just said like, oh, well, like I'll just leave the weed plants because who cares, it's weed, but I'll get rid of anything else that I have in the house.
That's what I'm thinking. I mean, I've been to a million houses where we find weed plants in the backyard, and I got to tell you, it's not our number one concern. A lot of the times it's for personal use. I'm not there kicking down doors for weed plants. I'm sorry. Just not what I'm doing. So if there's hard stuff in the house, the stuff that could get you a felony real quick, that
gone.
Stuff's going to be gone.
Yeah.
The weed plants outside in the garden, whatever.
Yeah. Well, for quite some time, Omar continued claiming he didn't know why the men were there to rob him. But then he changed his tune and told police that the attackers mentioned someone had ripped them off for $2,000. Where have we heard that number before in this case?
There you go. Suitcase.
This happened to be the exact same amount of money Pearl mentioned having in a suitcase from a recent vacation. Now, when investigators pressed him further, Omar claimed that it was Dwight McGhee, JC's nephew from California, who had stolen from them. He said the men had told him they weren't leaving this fucking hick town unless they got some money, and that they were going next door to JC's house to get some dope. And this does a little bit kind of correspond and support what you said last episode, where if there's an operation going down like this, you usually don't keep the drugs and the money in the same place in case they do get robbed, in case they get raided by the police.
That's it.
So one house will have the money, one house will have the drugs.
It's the most common thing I see.
And investigators had as many issues with this explanation as well. Like, why would the robbers drive from California to Ohio for a $2,000 ripoff? I mean, it feels like it would cost you that much in gas to get there. It just didn't make any sense. But Omar wasn't in the mood to give up any further information, and the interview ended. So investigators followed up with the automotive shop, Break and Block, where Omar claimed he ran after escaping. The owner said Omar arrived at 6:45 a.m. wearing only shorts, which didn't match what he had on when the police found him. He seemed winded. He asked them to call 911 before walking back home when he saw police cruisers. Other employees reported suspicious activity around Omar's that morning. One saw a Lincoln and a Cadillac with 2 black men inside. Another saw a small dark car in Omar's driveway and a black Lincoln with 3 men, one of whom ducked to avoid being seen. With all of this information, the investigators worked to determine who these men were and why they targeted Omar's home before going next door to murder JC. They had a few leads to follow immediately, and one of the strongest was JC's ongoing custody battle with Deneen over their son, Shane. JC was set to finalize custody of his son on July 12th, just a day after he was murdered, making it a key lead for investigators. And as we mentioned in part 1, his ex Deneen was dating Dwayne Butchie Griffin, who did have a personal vendetta against JC. Not only did he hate him over the custody battle, but he also blamed him for his indictment as a confidential informant.
There's no doubt JC didn't have a shortage of enemies. He had a lot of people that would want to hurt him. That's what complicates this case because the suspect pool is so vast.
Yeah. And I think that, once again, was it the custody thing, or if it was a setup, did they choose this date to make police say, oh, wow, this timing is perfect? They murdered him right before he was about to get custody, right?
Yeah.
It has echoes of like the Dan Markel and Wendy Adelson kind of case. Like as they're going through this contentious divorce and this horrific custody battle, Dan Markel ends up dead. Wendy Adelson, his ex-wife, ends up with custody of her sons, and the problem is solved, for Wendy at least, right?
Yep.
So obviously the police are going to interview Deneen and her boyfriend, Dwayne Butchie Griffin. During these interviews, Deneen made it clear that she and JC had a contentious history. Dwayne admitted that he despised JC, but denied any involvement, claiming a cousin had once offered to take care of JC, but he had declined. So Dwayne's pretty much being like, hey, I had the chance to take out a hit on this dude, and I didn't. So why would I now? That
he's totally
like,
clears you up.
And the fact that I think it does in a way, because he's like admitting, I hated this person.
I don't think he's responsible for it, but
no.
I don't think admitting that my cousin said he would kill him for me is probably the best thing.
Because this is what somebody's doing when they're like, holy shit, like, I know this looks bad, but I did hate him. He's not saying like, oh, we were fine. It wasn't that bad. Like, yeah, we had words sometimes. He's not trying to like minimize the hate that existed between him and this victim. He's being honest. And he's saying, yeah, like I despised this person, but I did not have involvement in this,
Might have thought about it.
Might have thought, maybe even had a conversation with my cousin, but.
Yep.
So Dwayne actually agreed to take a polygraph test, which he passed. So for now, it seemed that this lead maybe wasn't going to be as strong as it initially appeared. Now, JC's daughter, Madison, told us that JC being murdered the day before the final custody hearing was suspicious, but the more she has investigated the case, the less she believes the two things are connected. The other lead came from Omar's first interview with detectives. During that interview, he was asked if the robbers mentioned who had ripped them off, and at first he didn't provide an answer, but eventually he said it was Dwight McGhee, JC's nephew. And obviously investigators wanted to look into this claim, and they really didn't have to go that far. So we're going to take a quick break, and when I come back, we're going to talk a little bit about Dwight McGhee. You know how in true crime, it's always the little habits that give people away? Well, maybe it's time to ditch one of your own. Fume is here to help with a smarter alternative. Fume is a flavored air device, not a vape, not a pipe, but something completely different. And Fume lets you satisfy the urge to reach for something without nicotine, vapor, or batteries. Plus, it comes with amazing flavors like crisp mint, cinnamon hearts, and peach blush to keep things fresh. Now, I will say peach blush was always my go-to, but cinnamon hearts, I have a thing for cinnamon. Cinnamon gum, cinnamon candy. I love it. I don't know why. It's just a really great flavor for me. And this Fume core that comes in the cinnamon hearts flavor is so true to like taste. It's got that great cinnamon taste. I also love how the Fume device looks because it's got this beautiful wood grain finish. It's very classy looking. Yeah, it's got a nice weighted feel in your palm. There's like little dials and things that you can fidget with on it.
God, I always keep it on my desk. Sometimes I'm fidgeting with it off camera. You just don't see it, but you can hear the little clicks. Kind of cool. But I like the magnet.
We love Fume. We think you will as well. And Derek's going to tell you how you can try it out for yourself.
That's right. Fume has already helped over 400,000 people take steps toward better habits. And now it's your turn. To kick off the new year, use our code CRIMEWEEKLY to get your free gift with your journey pack. All you have to do is head over to tryfume.com. That's tryfum.com. Use our code CRIMEWEEKLY, that's all one word, and claim your limited time offer today. Go check them out, tryfume.com.
Okay, we're back. Let's continue on with this timeline and talk a little bit about Dwight McGhee, who is JC's nephew, who Omar claimed was the one that had ripped off these California burglars. So on July 13th, just 2 days after JC's murder, Omar's aunt, Debbie Jones, called the police, and she told them there was bad blood within the family and that Omar had actually ripped off Dwight, who lived in California, as well as his own brother, Omar's own brother, Richard Boots Foston, who lived in Columbus, Ohio. Debbie was aware that during the attack, the men had asked Pearl about her safe, which Pearl said both Dwight and Richard knew about. She suspected that Richard was behind the robbery and JC's murder because, in her words, quote, nothing bad happened to Pearl, end quote. All right, so Aunt Debbie, Omar's Aunt Debbie, who is also Pearl's sister, who is also JC's sister, right? She's like, listen, I think that Richard, who is Omar's brother that Omar stole from, and Dwight, they are the ones that did this. And the reason I believe this is because there's bad blood between them. Omar stole from them. And also Pearl wasn't harmed, so they didn't want to hurt their own aunt. Then that makes sense. Yeah.
They left her kind of unscathed. The only damage she had was basically the alcohol poured on her back.
And she had like marks on her wrist.
Yeah.
Yeah.
From the cords.
Yeah. The phone cords, right. So Debbie also revealed that on July 12th, Omar had confided in her about what had happened during the attack. According to what he told her, the men tied him up and demanded money, and Omar told them that his uncle JC had money. Now, at that point, two of the men dragged Omar next door, and as they forced him towards JC's house, he claims he yelled out, "Uncle JC, help, they're going to kill me." This is what Omar told his Aunt Debbie. Now, Debbie said that JC responded by shouting, "I got my child in here." She said that when JC reached for his gun, which he kept in the closet by the door, one of the men shot him, and the gunshot gave Omar a chance to escape. This don't make no sense. Okay, this doesn't make any sense.
Why doesn't it make sense to you?
Because I thought the closet that JC kept the gun in was in his room. And he wasn't in his room, which means when he made his way out of the room towards the door, he would have had a gun in his hand.
Yeah, I mean, I just feel like there could have been a scenario where the shooter felt like JC had a gun. I get what you're saying logistically, he couldn't have had the gun, but was that Omar's perspective where when he yells out for JC goes, "I got my kid in here," and they, the offenders that are with Omar realize there's about to be a shootout. They're looking for a gun and they think that JC has one in his hand, and that's why as soon as they kick that door in and JC's standing there, they shoot him. No questions asked.
But if they thought he had a gun, why would they even kick the door in?
I mean, that's something where it's like, hey, let's get to him before he gets to us type thing. It doesn't make sense for you and I. If someone says they have a gun inside, we're not running in there, right? But that's not how these criminals think sometimes. They're like, hey, you know what? I'm going to get in there and I'm going to kill him or he's going to kill me. Okay,
so here's my question then. Omar says he ran out of the house. They were shooting at him.
Yeah, that's bullshit.
And he was able to get to the auto body shop, and he's like, hey, you missed me. That's what his mother, Pearl, heard. That's what she told the cops, that she heard a gunshot, and then he said, ha, you missed me. But here, the gunshot that's killing his uncle JC is giving him a chance to get away, and he's not yelling, ha, you missed me.
Well, I will tell you, that's something I thought about. Like, is it possible? Because we haven't been at the actual crime scene. Like, we're thinking about what the apartment, or I should say the house, looks like in our heads. We don't know how big it is, right? We don't know the proximity of everything. Is it possible, as Omar's running away, shot goes off as they're shooting JC, Omar thinks that shot was actually intended for him, and that's why he yells it?
Maybe, I guess.
You know? You missed me. No, dude, the bullet wasn't even coming in your direction. You know?
Okay.
I'm not trying to give benefit of the doubt. I'm just trying to explore all scenarios.
All right, so obviously Aunt Debbie, she calls the police on July 12th, and she's like, yo, something shady's going on here. Here's what Omar told me.
Yeah, this is the day after the shooting.
Yeah, and the police are like, well, that version of events that Omar told you is completely different from the version of events that Omar told us.
Yep.
So they call him back in to discuss the inconsistencies in his statement. And when he comes back into the police station, Omar told the police that the attackers were after the money that Richard Foston, his brother, had stashed at their mother's house. Omar also claimed that the men told him to send Richard a message. He then changed his account of his escape, now saying he was taken outside and forced to point out different houses before he heard a gunshot and started running. Now, this doesn't make sense now with Pearl hearing him say, you missed me. If he heard a gunshot and started running, he wouldn't think that they were actively shooting at him. He says the way he makes it seem is these guys are all standing outside with their guns drawn. He runs out of the house. They start shooting at him. He knows they're shooting at him. And he's like, haha, you missed me. But now he just hears a shot. He doesn't know where it's coming from. He doesn't know where it is. And he starts running, right? So Omar also mentioned seeing a purple PT Cruiser nearby, but he was unclear on the details. He then agreed to a polygraph, which, surprise, surprise, he showed signs of deception on.
No.
I know, it's crazy.
Omar,
man. I was rooting for you.
Man, Omar.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know what, once again, when you have so many different versions of the same story, and it's not a long time after. It's like a day. It's the day of, and then the day after.
Stephanie, the truth, we're getting this. The truth is in there somewhere, though.
Of course, it has to be.
There's some things that you've said, and I'm trying not to step on everything because you're telling a story here, and I don't want to interject every line. But there's things you're starting to say that answer a lot of the questions we had in episode 1. And they might not be completely truthful, but there is some truth within it.
Now, Kim, Omar's girlfriend, her story remained mostly consistent, and she was also brought in for questioning again. And this time she told the detectives she didn't believe the robbery was about drugs, and neither she nor Omar had enough money to make them targets. She believed the attackers were after Richard's money, which was kept in Pearl's safe. She also suspected her brother-in-law, Justin, had tipped them off because he was beaten up the day after the murder. So now we're adding more people in here. More people. It feels like everybody knows. Everybody knows about why this is happening, right? But they're not saying that right away. At first, Pearl's like, why us? Why us? And Kim's like, why us? But it's like, actually, there is money that was taken and in Pearl's safe. And my brother, he was running his mouth. He got beat up, things like that. So Omar and Kim then helped police create composite sketches of the suspects. But Omar's composite sketches and Kim's composite sketches, they look nothing alike. Nothing alike. So I would obviously, if I was the police, I would go with Kim's composite sketches, but what do I know? So before the end of that month, Omar, Kim, and Pearl all went back to the police station to view photo lineups of potential suspects. And Omar was able to identify one of the men in the photos as a man named Daryl Smith. And Kim did the same. She said Daryl was the one with the shotgun. Omar told police that he recognized Daryl from a class the previous year, but the police later learned the truth was that they'd known each other since they were kids. So they didn't just have a class together. Omar and Daryl, they'd been tight since they were little. Daryl was also friends with Omar's brother, Richard Foston, the guy whose money Pearl is apparently hiding in her safe. Omar also told police that Daryl's ex-girlfriend, Tisha, drove a purple PT Cruiser, the same kind of car he had recently mentioned seeing near JC's house on the morning of the murder. He added that he saw both a black Lincoln Town car and a dark-colored PT Cruiser leaving JC's house. He also told investigators that Tisha had dated Dwight McGhee at one point and had an affair with JC. So this is getting a little tangled. A little complicated.
I'm running out of paper here.
We got more people coming in. Tisha now, she's been all over. She's been with JC, apparently, our victim. She's been with Dwight McGhee from California. And she's dating, or she had dated, Daryl, the man with the shotgun, Daryl Smith. Isn't Kim's last name Smith as well?
Yeah, I'm telling you, I'm not even joking with you. I mean, you guys can see it on YouTube. This is I don't know if it's blurry right now, but I'm writing on the side here too because I'm running out of real estate. I'm gonna have to go to page. I like to try to keep it all on one page so I can refer
So you
to
can
it.
refer to it. Yeah, I
But
know
now
exactly what you mean.
I might have to change up the strategy.
So we got a lot of people here, but I want to talk about the cars really quick because the automotive people at Break and Block, they had mentioned seeing some cars outside. The employees at Break and Block, they said that they had seen suspicious activity around Omar's that morning. They saw a Lincoln and a Cadillac, and another saw a small dark car in Omar's driveway, and then a black Lincoln with 3 men. Now, would you consider a PT Cruiser to be a small car?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so it could have been that black PT Cruiser that Omar's also talking about, but none of those employees mentioned seeing a purple PT Cruiser.
It could have been such a dark purple though.
Could have been, but what would it have been doing in Omar's driveway?
Well, that's the problem, right? That would suggest that Omar's involved more than he's saying.
Yeah, because they're not going to pull up in the driveway and, like kidnap these people or keep them hostage in their own home while their car's parked in the driveway to be identified.
I also found it odd that Omar said that him and his girlfriend Kim were just like watching TV before things went down because
it was like 5 a.m. Yeah, it was 5 a.m.
6:40 in the morning. You guys are just watching show tunes. Like, what are we doing here?
I think they were watching Matlock. That's what she said.
Matlock. That's right. They did say Matlock at 6 in the morning.
Yeah.
Okay.
Like, do you sleep?
I hope that law enforcement went and checked to see if an episode of Matlock was playing at that time.
And not only that, but it's like Omar's apparently this college student. Do you not have class the next day? Like, what's going on here? So in addition to Daryl Smith, Kim was able to identify another attacker with 100% certainty. However, that person's name was redacted in police reports, strangely enough. Kim also thought she recognized a third man, but she wasn't completely sure. When we spoke to Madison, she told us that the names most frequently mentioned in this case belonged to Daryl Smith, Danny Banks, Tone, and another man named Duncan Waits. So there's names being brought up. Now, whatever name that Kim said, that second name where she was like, I'm 100% sure I know this person. I saw him. This is his name. It's redacted from police reports. This case has gone cold. It's unsolved. So with all this information, with knowing that there was somebody robbed, with knowing that there was money being stored in the safe, with having actual names, cars, descriptions of cars, all these other people, for the police to redact one of these names and then not have gotten further in the case, it seems a little weird.
I don't love that. I don't understand why that one name would be redacted. I don't understand it. It's potentially a scenario where that person's a CI. I don't know without being inside the four walls of that police department. But there was something I said on the phone to Madison, and this might be a good time to bring it up now. And we said it in last episode. There's no doubt JC was a CI, and law enforcement is working with these guys. And when I was in charge of the narcotics unit, there was a lot of times where if we'd hear about a CI get in trouble, get arrested, or get injured or something like that, we wanted to know all the specifics of it, because even though they're their own person and they sign waivers and all these things, if you end up having a CI get hurt or robbed or worse, killed, that can come back on your unit. It's a big deal, not only from a professional standpoint of, people are not going to trust you anymore to protect them if they work with you, but also just as a police department and the responsibility we have that if we're using these people for these types of actions, we do have a certain level of responsibility when it comes to their safety. Yeah,
because you're basically holding their past crimes against them, saying, hey, work for me, but knowing that you're putting them
at risk
in a very dangerous position.
That's right. Yeah. That's right. So, they're on their own. We're not, there's a big waiver you sign. Like when you become a confidential informant, you get signed up and there's this whole process. We do your background check. We do an interview with you, a pre-interview, and then you also sign a waiver basically saying, like, I understand these are the reasons that I'm doing this, and that if there is some inherent risk with doing it, and I could be hurt or because of it. And even though they're signing that away, even though I guess technically we're protected, it's not good, and that's not what we do. And I always put an emphasis on that. We only had we'd be running 4 or 5 CIs, CWs at a time because you wanted to have control of all of them. And I made sure that my guys knew who were handling each CI, that they kept tabs on them, not only for their safety, but also to make sure that they didn't think they had the right to go out there and commit other crimes. It even got to a point where if our CIs were talking, like if they got stopped by police officers on the street from our own department, they weren't allowed to say to them, hey, I'm working for Derek.
Of course, yeah.
But if I got word that they were disrespectful or they were involved in something, a fight or whatever, that they were there and I saw it on the dispatch log, they're done. That's
not going to be a CI anymore?
You're done.
And
You're
then
done.
what? Then what happens? Is their deal redacted? Do they go to prison?
They don't go to prison. So here's the thing. These are good questions, I think. And I think this is something that I automatically assume people know. Here's the reality. If someone is arrested for a serious crime and we work out a deal, it has to be worked out with the AG. Like, it's not something where we can say, hey, we're going to not prosecute this case right now. That has to be agreed upon. What actually happens a lot of the time, let's say we get them with a piece of crack cocaine, right? It's like $20 worth. I may get that. I'm going to process it. I'm going to do all the paperwork for it. And I'm going to say, hey, listen, here's the deal. I have discretion with this. I can charge you with it or I cannot. I'm not going to fingerprint you. I'm not going to do anything right now. I have this, but I could charge you later with it because I have to wait for the official results, the toxicology results to come back. So I could still charge you at that point. Here's the reality. I know there's not too many criminals listening to this. If I don't arrest them at that point, the case is already weakened. I'm not going to charge them later, but they don't need to know that. So I may have the weed or the crack, but guess what? 99.9999% of the time, it's getting destroyed the appropriate way. And I'm basically giving up that arrest. So I'll say to them, hey, Stephanie, this is what I got you with. This is what I want in return. And they agree to it. Now, they could bunk out on me and not come back. Yes, I'm pointing at you. It could be you. They could say, yeah, I'll do that for you. And then guess what? They never pick up my phone again. There's nothing I can do about it. But my thing was, hey, once you work off your beef, like let's say I get you with something, you get me something bigger. Then what I would always say is, okay, well, I can't pay you for this. This is working off of beef. But if you ever want to make some money, let us know.
Oh, so they're just kind of now the initial thing that they do, that's over, and they make money. They are paid
Correct.
For their role as CI. Okay.
Absolutely.
So it's like a job.
Absolutely like a job. Yeah. I mean, it's one of those things where we are paying them for that service. And it's very well documented. You have to report, you have to make sure you keep track of every single dollar. But it may be something where, hey, listen, there's a house over here. I know you're not directly connected to it. You're not bringing me the information. But what I want you to do is go over there and see if you can do it hand to hand. We're just going to be monitoring. Don't worry about where we are. You just go do your thing. They'll come back. They'll have to write up a small thing. We'll obviously search them before they go make the buy. We'll search them after they make the buy to make sure they don't have anything else on them. And then we write it all up. We have to keep observation of them the entire time while they're going to the house, while they're returning from the house. And we can use that not to get an arrest, but for an affidavit for a search warrant because they're not going to testify to it. So that's what we do there. But then in exchange for that service, I won't say exactly what we pay them, but we pay them a certain amount. It's not a lot, but we pay them a certain amount. And most of the time they come back. And that's when we will draw up the official paperwork and say, hey, you're going to be a CI. You're on the payroll, but here's some of the rules. Can't get in trouble. Can't be out there using this as a get out of jail free card. If I hear that you mentioned that you're working for Derek or one of my other guys, you're done. If you're out there getting in fights or you're getting in trouble or you get caught with something else, you are going to jail for it.
Okay, so that's what I was going to ask. It's kind of expected that they should probably be keeping their noses clean. Like you don't want them out there outside of their role as an informant buying and doing drugs or selling drugs.
No, they could never come to me after and say, oh, I was only doing that to test the waters for you later. Nope, not buying it. Go to jail.
So if JC was actively at that point running some sort of drug operation with his sister or his nephew outside of these two homes, that would be frowned upon by the police 100%. That he was informing for.
Now, am I going to sit here and tell you, I'm telling you, I never did it, but am I going to sit here and be naive enough to say that there probably isn't detectives out there who have CIs working for them that are also dealing drugs and they know about it and are choosing not to hit that specific house at that specific time?
Right.
Of course they are.
Of course.
Of course they are. You know, you have a lot of houses that are selling drugs. If one of them happens to be someone who's working for you, getting a lot of drugs off the street, is that going to be your top priority to go hit it? Are you going to send a CI over there to go do that one when you have others you could be doing? Probably not.
Okay. So especially if you're a good CI, you're bringing lots of information in, maybe they just kind of turn a blind eye, look the other way.
But that is not said directly, maybe implied, but I can tell you I can only speak from my experience. I told them, hey, listen, understand this. Not only do you not have a get out of jail free card, you're more under the microscope now. If you don't stay clean, if this isn't your chance to turn things around, I'm going to make sure that we hit you with everything we can. School zone, distribution, manufacturing, intent to deliver. I'm going to hit you with everything because now you and I are making an agreement. So not only are you doing something illegal, but now you're spitting in my face. So if I'm putting money in your pocket, you got to do me right too. And if you're out there still selling drugs, because listen, I'm not telling them, hey, you're going to work for me and you can still go sell your drugs. I'm hoping that it's an opportunity for them to not do those things anymore. Here's your reason to get out of this game.
Yeah, because they got an opportunity. They got caught doing something wrong. And instead of being in prison and having that on their record.
Here's your second chance.
Make the most of it.
And they don't have to do that for me. Once they work off their beef, they can just go away scot-free. But if they want to make money, that's how it works, But there's definitely risks involved with all of it. But to bring this all back, when I have informants that are working for me, I do have an official responsibility to ensure that I do whatever I can to make sure that they're safe. And that if there's anybody who figures out who they are and what they're doing, that I get to them first and get them to a safe area. I don't think that's what happened here with what happened to JC. I think based on everything we've gone over so far, there's much more to this one. And I don't think it had anything to do with one of the current cases he was working. Now, the bigger case for 75 indictments, where people went away to prison for life, from what Madison was telling us, could one of those people have an axe to grind? Absolutely.
And could somebody have figured out somehow that he was a CI and been like, oh, this dude is still being a snitch?
Of course. Could have been Omar. Mm-hmm. Could have been anybody. Could have been Richard. Could have been one of these many players you mentioned, So there's a lot to it. But it is a tricky game. Narcotics, best 4 years of my career working narcotics.
Well, I'm sure it was action-packed.
But it's also the most dangerous time of my career. Like you're going after really bad guys, but you're also befriending a lot of bad guys too.
Yeah, because you're involved with money, which people will kill for. You're involved with drugs, which changes people and makes them do things that they normally wouldn't do. And you're kind of trying to put all these pieces in a way where everybody's protected and you're protected and you're still like able to solve some of these crimes and put bad guys away. But it feels very complicated. There's a lot of gray areas there, it feels like.
Trust me, there were many nights where I'm sitting in the car in the passenger seat, the front seat, and the CI, who's a bad dude, is sitting directly behind me. And I got one of my partners sitting next to him. And I can't tell you how many times I was nervous, like, man, make sure you search this fucker good that's behind me because he could take me and you out right now.
Yep.
Many of those nights.
Yeah.
Where we're trying to like, hey, what's the deal? We'd meet in an alley somewhere. We're in this unmarked car. And I'm thinking, for all we know, they could be getting a drop on us right now. How do we know he didn't bring us here to set us up?
Yeah.
Lot of scary nights.
Damn. It's not the same thing, but I just watched a YouTube video where some 17-year-old kid said that his friend wanted him to bring him to a bad part of town. And, he finally agreed to do it. And then they get out of the car and this kid just turns on him and shoots him multiple times with this like bird shot in the stomach. He ended up surviving this. And then he was like hitting him and pistol whipping him. And he was like, oh, this guy set me up because it was some like gang initiation. And that was how he got into his gang, by killing somebody he knew. And he happened to pick me. But it's like, you just never know.
You never know.
When someone's going to
You don't know what their agenda is until you know. Yeah. And just to round this out and to bring it back to JC, why was this name redacted? It could be one of the many reasons I just laid out to you, or it could be another CI. It could be completely unrelated. We don't know because after all these years, they haven't released it. That's where the questions come.
Well, let's take a quick break and then we will be right back. So I love bread. I'm an Italian girl. I was raised in an Italian household where bread and pasta were, pretty much on the menu for every single meal. However, I have been tending now in my advanced years to lean towards healthier bread options. And with Hero Bread, you can focus on your health goals and still indulge in that soft, fluffy experience that you love guilt-free. I love the tortillas. Hero Bread also makes sliced bread loaves, bagels, and dinner rolls. The dinner rolls are excellent as well. And I'm very excited about Hero Bread's new everyday favorite, the Hero Classic Plain Bagel with 4 grams net carbs, 0 sugar, and 19 grams of protein. And I'm really excited now to try Hero's flaky croissants and delicious cheddar biscuits. I'm a sucker for a cheddar biscuit, man.
I need the cheddar biscuits.
But tell them how they could check Hero Bread out for themselves and get a great discount.
That's right. Real quick, I had smoked salmon, cream cheese on a Hero Bread bagel. Phenomenal. Delicious. So good. And if you want to check out Hero Bread and try your own little concoction, now's the time. Hero Bread is offering 10% off your order. All you have to do is go to hero.co and use our code CRIMEWEEKLY at checkout. Crime Weekly is all one word. Once again, that's CRIMEWEEKLY at HERO.co. Go check them out. Hero Bread, you're not going to regret it.
Okay, so Pearl, Omar's mom, she's back at the police station. She's kind of, identifying people. They're trying to figure out if her story is consistent with Kim's story and Omar's story. And before the end of her interview, Pearl told police that on either July 24th or July 25th, Kim's sister had been at a restaurant when 3 men approached her. And one of them was Daryl. This would be Daryl Smith.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. And as they walked by, one of them asked her, "How was your sister's head?" Which I don't know if that's super suspicious because it probably would have already gotten around what happened in that house, so. But he could also be saying it as in keep your mouth.
Yeah, keep your mouth shut. 100%.
Yeah. So the very next day, Daryl was arrested and charged with JC's murder. And when he was questioned by police, Daryl denied any involvement. He claimed he didn't even know JC had been killed until someone told him about it the next day, and he insisted that he was being set up. He alleged that JC's mother had asked Tisha for a photo of him before the lineup, and he believed it was so that Kim would be able to pick him out of that photo lineup. He also accused Kim, Pearl, and Omar of lying about the attacks, though he didn't speculate on why they would lie. He said he wasn't sure what happened to JC, but he had heard that a safe had been brought down from Columbus for safekeeping.
Yeah. The safe is a big part of this story. And that when I said earlier that there's some truth in there, the security system, the safe in the house, when you don't have a ton of money, a ton of valuables, $2,000 hanging out in a suitcase, there's some truth woven in between these bullshit stories. And I do think that safe, the money, there was a lot of people believing that there was a stash in that house at that time. And they weren't completely wrong because there was $2,000 in the suitcase.
Yep. And when Daryl was arrested, he had been with a new girlfriend named Jill Templin. So Jill told police that she'd been with Daryl on the night of July 10th. She said they were at a bar called Michael's until around 3 a.m. before they headed to another bar, Sundown, which closed at 3:30. I don't know why you'd be at one bar till 3 and then go to another bar for 25 minutes, but okay. After that, they stood outside talking with friends until around 3:45 a.m. When they finally left, they went to Daryl's mother's house where he was living at the time. But when they got there, Daryl realized he didn't have his key and he didn't want to wake his family up. So he asked Jill if she had a tent in her car. And she did, so they decided to go camping for the night. Does Jill not have a place she lives? Does Jill not have a home? Does Jill not have a place she lays her head at night? Like a little impromptu camping? Like, do you have a tent in your car? Actually, I do.
I do.
What? This is craziness.
Well, why would you say that, though?
Because you can't be, they can't put you anywhere if you're camping in the wilderness.
They're not going to track anywhere in the middle of the woods. You could be anywhere. Nobody's going to be able to confirm your story. It's a great alibi.
It's 4 o'clock in the damn morning.
Yeah.
And he's like, hey, you want to, why wouldn't you sleep in the car?
Yeah, no, it's bullshit.
Hey, you want to go camping? Yeah, why the hell not? I happen to have a tent.
Daryl's not looking good here.
Daryl's not looking good.
And what's interesting about this, as we're halfway through this episode, a little more than halfway, we've all been looking at JC as the target. When if this is true and Daryl's the guy, then Omar's the target, not JC. Interesting, right?
Why would they go to JC's then?
Well, there could be some truth to what we've been hearing where they're looking for the money and they're thinking it's going to be in one of these two houses. They're stashing it set down somewhere. If it's not in this safe, it's got to be at the other house. And maybe Omar says, yeah, it's over there, or he yells out for JC. But they came down to look for the money, knowing it was in one of those two houses.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I'm just saying it's interesting that as we get to this point, now there's this other version emerging where if Daryl, who's not looking good, is one of the guys, then the target was Richard and Omar, not JC and Omar. And that's fascinating to me.
Well, we have to talk about the camping still. Okay?
Oh, yeah, we got to go back to the Coleman stove, the whole thing.
Yeah, Jill gave some details. She said they arrived at the campsite between 4:15 and 4:30 a.m.
Totally normal.
And they went to sleep around 5 or 5:15 a.m. They woke up at 8 a.m. because that's enough sleep.
Conveniently, right in the window when the shooting would have happened.
Yeah, they were in the woods camping at the time that the shooting was going on.
Totally believable.
Because you definitely would go to sleep in a tent in the middle of the woods after being up all night and falling asleep at 5:15 a.m. And then like clockwork at 8 a.m. You're like, I'm refreshed, I'm ready.
What time was the shooting again? Oh,
the shooting was around 6:40, 6:45, yeah.
Right there.
So they got up at 8. They didn't leave until 9. They had to have their coffee and make their bacon outside. And then they
had
a
marshmallow or two.
I know, right? Maybe
get the whole experience.
Run with the bears. So they headed back to Daryl's mother's house, and they got there around 10 a.m., and that's where they stayed for the rest of the day. Now, Jill told police that Dwight McGhee had called her and threatened her the following month. She said he told her that she, quote, better come forward with information on Daryl Smith, or she should, quote, watch her back. She also mentioned that despite living in California, Dwight had been seen back in Ohio recently. So the detectives then interviewed Daryl's ex-girlfriend, Tisha, who Omar had claimed drove a PT Cruiser and had relations. I wouldn't say dated both JC and Dwight, but had relations with both JC and Dwight. Now, Tisha admitted that she occasionally saw JC, but denied ever having an affair with him, and she confirmed that she had dated Dwight in the past and was familiar with his parents. She told police that they should be looking more into JC's family than Daryl. According to her, aside from his sudden relationship with Jill, Daryl seemed perfectly normal in the weeks leading up to the murder. She said the last time she saw him before JC was killed was the night of July 10th, and everything seemed fine. Next, detectives interviewed Nicole Daniels, who claimed Daryl Smith had committed multiple robberies and used 2 cars in his crimes. She also linked him to a home invasion targeting Sherman Griffin. So Sherman told the police that in 2001, Daryl and another man tied him up, robbed him, and stole his car before abandoning it. He also accused Daryl of previously shooting him, and other sources confirmed that Daryl had been involved in home invasions where victims were tied up. So it looks like his MO might be lining up with what happened to Omar and his girlfriend and his mom.
Absolutely.
However, this seems to also be common knowledge, so Omar could know that about Daryl and could have made his story and his, whole setup mirror what Daryl would have done so that people like us would have an easier time believing it. Well, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Look, he's done it before. Why wouldn't he do it again?
That is his MO. So this is when detectives spoke with Dwight McGhee. And Dwight told them that he believed the key to solving the case lay with Richard and Omar Foston. He explained that on the day of JC's funeral, all the McGhee and Foston cousins got together to discuss the murder, trying to figure out if anyone had any connections to what happened, even if it had been unintentional. And during that conversation, fingers were pointed at Richard Foston, who became so angry that he had to be removed from the discussion. I don't know how that, what do you mean? He had to be physically removed from the house, or were they just we're not talking to you, you don't get the talking stick anymore? I'm not sure, but apparently he was in an elevated mood. And so the police then went to Daryl for an interview, and he told them that there were rumors that Richard Foston had borrowed $250,000 for drugs and never paid it back. And allegedly, Omar had been instructed to watch the money. So this is starting to make more sense. If there's $250,000 out there unaccounted for, that would make sense why somebody would drive from California to Ohio. But $2,000, less likely, less of a motive.
Bingo. See what I'm saying? There's truth in there somewhere. I don't want to go off the path too much, but I've said it before. I actually wrote about this in my book. When you're interviewing a witness, especially someone who has something to lose, You want to shut up and listen, and you want to create this awkward silence because it's natural psychologically for one human to want to fill that void, that emptiness. So I had given the example in the book where you ask someone, you say, hey, did you see what happened over here? And they'll, nah, man, didn't see anything. Don't immediately respond with another question. Just give it a couple seconds. I mean, I saw a car driving over this way, but I couldn't get out the plate or anything. Just kind of, write something down, pretend you're looking around. It doesn't always work, but then okay, listen, I might have seen a plate. It was AR 275, but that's all I know. That's all I know. Then you ask some more questions and you start to drive down that road. And a lot of the times what they initially told you, which was nothing, will end in them giving you a name, a description, the time, and all this because they know that or at least they believe that you know more than you're telling them. So that awkwardness, that guilt creates an opportunity for them to disclose more than they should. And I really do believe that what you're describing here throughout this episode is an example of that. It started off with a really vague story that didn't make a lot of sense. And as time goes on and people are getting nervous and feeling like they have to do something to protect themselves, they're starting to roll on each other and they're starting to divulge more information. But here's the unfortunate part. They're giving you certain pieces of truth, but with mostly bullshit. And it's on us to figure out what's fact from fiction. And what you just did 2 minutes ago is a perfect example of that. A home invasion at this level with multiple people, this coordinated effort to kill people and go in these houses for $2,000.
$2,000, yeah.
That doesn't make sense. Add another zero.
Mm-hmm.
Makes a lot more sense now, doesn't it?
Yep.
That you would risk jeopardizing your own freedom and getting caught.
Exactly.
For $200,000.
$2,000. It's not a small amount of money, but it's not worth the risk of going to prison for the rest. Yeah, it's not worth the risk of going to prison for the rest of your life.
Just one little detail that they mixed up. Oh, it was $2,000. They're not going to say $250 because if they say that, then the police are going to say, "Where'd you get that amount of money from?"
Mm-hmm. Oh,
that would implicate them. So they give you a bullshit number, and it doesn't compute with what we're saying. Why would they bring them outside? Why would he potentially threaten to execute him in the middle of the day for $200,000? People would do a lot more than that.
And Pearl didn't even really have to talk about, unless the police found it in the suitcase, she didn't really have to even talk about the fact that she had $2,000 in cash in the suitcase.
I would argue that if Pearl didn't know about it, they brought Omar outside to say, listen, motherfucker, you know why we're here. Where's the fucking money? Where is it? They didn't want to do it in front of her.
Yeah.
Because there is some knowledge that they all know each other. So they're not going to do it in front of her because they're trying to give him an opportunity to say where the money is without exposing him to his mom.
Yeah, well, it's interesting. Pearl and Omar have a safe in the house. The police open the safe. It's empty.
Oh, yeah.
But Omar allegedly was tasked with watching this $250K that his brother Richard had borrowed for drugs and never paid back.
Borrowed. Air quotes. Air quotes.
So Daryl also told the police that he believed Kim had been coached in her statements, which is possible. Investigators then spoke with Kim Smith's brother-in-law, Justin, and Justin told police that while he was at a bar, he overheard someone talking about JC's murder, and he heard 3 names said in relation to this murder. Daryl Smith, Danny Banks, 2 names we've already heard.
Yep.
And then another one we haven't heard, Brandon Creighton. Now, he said that they were all referred to using code names. Daryl's code name was Be Nice, Danny was Dan Bino, and Brandon was Black. So some code names here that don't make any sense and some that are super uncreative. Justin also said that at one point while he was at the bar, he got up to shake Brandon Creighton's hand, but instead of greeting him, Brandon started cussing him out as Justin left, and threats were yelled at him. He also confirmed to police that Daryl used to drive a dark-colored PT Cruiser. So police then spoke to Danny Banks, who is Daryl Smith's cousin. Danny admitted that he knew Brandon Creighton, and he said that on the night of July 10th, he'd gone out to a few bars with his sister and her friend, and at some point, someone hit him in the face, and he ended up in the hospital. He was released around 5 or 6 a.m., but returned to a different hospital a few hours later. Man, these people have eventful lives. 1 minute they're hanging out at the bar, the next they're camping in the woods. 1 minute they're hanging out at the bar, the next they're spending, hours in different hospitals.
Criminals like this in this lower level tier, this is a common story. They're just always getting in trouble, and it's this ancestral group of people. They all kind of know each other. They're all sleeping with each other. They're robbing each other. They're fighting each other. And then the next week they're hanging out at a party together. It's very, very common.
I guess so. Well, listen, we're going to hear what Brandon Creighton has to say because the police are going to talk to him. But first, let's take our last break and we'll be right back. One of the smartest apps you can have on your phone in 2025 is Upside. Upside gives you the power to earn more on the stuff you buy all the time. Whether you're filling up your tank, going out to eat, or shopping for groceries, the Upside app lets you earn cash back on every purchase, and Upside users are making as much as $280 a year. So the Upside app is going to let you get cash back on daily essentials like gas, groceries, and dining. I use it at gas stations every single time I fill up. And to get started, all you have to do is download the free Upside app. You use our promo code CRIMEWEEKLY, and then you're going to get an extra 25 cents back for every gallon on your first tank of gas. Next, you're going to claim an offer for whatever you're buying on Upside, then pay as usual with a credit or debit card following the steps in the app, and then you get paid. And there's over 100,000 gas stations, grocery stores, and restaurants on the Upside app, and this ensures that cashback is always just around the corner. So I'm using it at restaurants too. In fact, I have found myself looking at what restaurants are on Upside and purposely and intentionally going there because I know I'm going to get cash back, and there's just something very satisfying about it. Like I feel like I'm getting away with something. So Derek's going to tell you how you can check Upside out for yourself.
That's right. Download the free Upside app and use promo code CRIMEWEEKLY to get an extra 25 cents back for every gallon on your first tank of gas. That's an extra 25 cents back for every gallon on your first tank of gas using our promo code CRIMEWEEKLY, or you can scan the QR code on the screen right now.
Okay, we're back. So when police questioned Brandon Creighton, he told them that on the night of July 10th, he had been with his girlfriend, Angela. Let's see what Brandon got into that night. That night of July 10th. Was he camping?
Yep.
What was he doing?
He was at the campsite next to Danny.
He remembers astral projecting.
Or Daryl, I should say.
Yeah. He was flying around the neighborhood in his dreams. Okay, so he says he's with his girlfriend, Angela, on July 10th. But here's the thing. When investigators spoke to Angela, she said she didn't actually remember what had happened that night. She only remembered what Brandon had told her. So Angela's not a good Bonnie to Brandon's Clyde, okay?
Yeah, not a good alibi.
So at this point, no one seemed to have an airtight alibi. We got camping, we got hospitals, all sorts of things. The police brought Omar back in for questioning, and once again, his story changed. This time, he told investigators that two of the attackers were Daryl Smith and Brandon Creighton, and that Daryl was the one who shot and killed JC. He claimed that while he knew both Daryl and Brandon, he had not recognized them during the attack because they had changed their voices. Remember, they're wearing hoodies, no masks. They have hoodies on, no masks.
They're not geniuses, Stephanie.
He does not recognize them. They disguised their voices.
Mm-hmm.
But then he contradicted himself by saying that he had seen Daryl's face during the attack and knew it was him. So Omar is also not looking good. Daryl, Omar.
Which, by the way, also happens a lot, where it's, criminal on criminal crime.
Mm-hmm.
They get arrested. Oh, you want to tell us who did it? Nah, I'm good. Like this code.
But it's funny because all of these people know each other. They're all in, like you said, low-level crime. And so it's almost like, I don't believe anything you say because you didn't say Brandon's name until it came up
Correct.
With Kim's brother-in-law. And now all of a sudden you're saying Brandon's name, and now you didn't know who these people were, but now you know it was Daryl and you saw his face. But it's because you already know that these people like you are into like illegal stuff, and it won't be hard to believe that they would do something like this.
Yeah.
So it's hard to believe that as the story evolves and develops and more details are added and more people are added, that it's not just happening as a convenient way of being like, oh yeah, actually, I do remember. Oh, and actually, Brandon Creighton was there. Oh, and actually, I didn't see Daryl's face, but I did.
I do think it is convenient that none of these guys that are being mentioned have any type of alibi, though. I will say, I get what you're saying, but the fact that they all have horrible alibis does not make them look good. And I will say that I just mentioned that you'll ask these guys, hey, did you see who did it? Nah, I didn't see. Some of it's code, but another explanation could be that Omar and Richard know why they came after them. And they're not, if they tell you part of the story, the other part could come out, that they're ripping people off, that they're selling drugs. So just as a self-preservation move, they're not going to implicate anybody directly at first because they know it could come back on them. So yes, it could be them just using it as a matter of convenience because the name is getting thrown out there. It could also be being done as a form of self-preservation to not expose themselves. In this case, Omar and Richard being exposed not only as drug dealers, but also thieves who owe someone a lot of money.
All right, so what you're saying is Omar could be lying, but he could be lying not because he was involved with what happened to JC. He could be lying to protect himself because whatever he and his brother did triggered this thing to happen.
Stephanie, that's the narrative you're laying out right now, and I'm buying it, by the way. I'm buying a scenario, and I don't want to I want to get there first, but it's really looking like JC was just at the wrong place at the wrong time right now, even with his past.
Even with everything?
There has been nothing that suggests someone went there directly for him, because you and I asked the question episode 1. Why go to this other house if JC's right there? Why create all these extra variables where you can be discovered? They didn't go to the first house to create a ruse. They went to the first house because that was the target. JC was brought into it by Omar, potentially, after the fact. So we'll get to it in the end. I already have a million things I want to say, but what you're saying as you're laying it out, we're getting there. We're pulling back the threads one by one. There is some truth in here, and I feel like when Omar's originally questioned, he's questioned in a way where he's being treated as a victim, and he wants to remain that way. And just to add on to something that Madison told both of us, now this is her opinion, she was told by someone in law enforcement investigating this case that Omar was, quote, always to be treated as a victim, right? That's what she said. Now, that's not directly from us. That's from Madison, but that's what she was told. So that is interesting, but it would make sense why Omar wouldn't want to say anything that would make him look like a criminal as well.
Okay, well...
You're not agree. I mean, are you with me, kind of?
Yeah, kind of. I am kind of with you. I just think that it's such a coincidence, once again. Like, he's shot. Nobody went through his house. Nobody looked through his house for money. If they genuinely thought $250,000 could be in JC's house, they still would have gone in there after they shot him to look for it.
You think so?
But they
because at that point, somebody could have heard the pop.
Yes,
and they hear other people in the house.
I don't know. Maybe.
Let's finish this up, and then we'll go over the scenarios, because I think we have so much to talk about.
All right. So later, Omar changed his explanation again. Now he said he hadn't originally told the police that Daryl was involved because they had been treating him like a suspect. He also claimed he had doubts about whether the man he saw was actually Daryl. Omar told police that he had heard the name Tone before and that Tone lived in Columbus and had been involved in a robbery. He also recalled something specific about the way the attackers spoke during the break-in. At one point, he said they kicked Pearl and called her a, quote, West Virginia northern bitch, end quote. And that detail stood out to investigators because West Virginia Northern was the name of the place where Pearl worked. So Omar then said he overheard the attackers saying, "There's no money in here, we're going to the next house." He claimed he never heard any gunshots, but when he escaped, he saw a PT Cruiser parked in JC's driveway. So now he hasn't heard any gunshots. Now they're not shooting at him as he runs. Now he's not like, ha ha ha, you missed me. It's a completely different story. And during another follow-up interview, Omar identified a new man in a photo lineup. This person's name is redacted. And Omar said he was 99% sure the man had been involved in the attack. He told police that he had known this person before the home invasion because they'd taken a math class together. But when police asked why, if he already knew the man, he hadn't identified him sooner, Omar said that he wasn't certain it was the same person. So Omar was interviewed at least 2 more times after that. In one of those interviews, he added another name to the list of alleged attackers, Danny Banks. This is a name we've heard before. This is the name that Madison told us has often popped up alongside her father's murder. Omar also told the police that a woman named Nicole had been the lookout for Daryl and that she'd been driving a PT Cruiser that belonged to Tisha. In another interview, Omar named several men he believed were present during the attack, though some of their names were redacted in police records. He said Daryl Smith and another man had acted as lookouts. He also claimed that a few people outside of the family knew the layout of both the McGhee and the Foston houses, and that it was common knowledge that JC had a safe with thousands of dollars inside. Omar also reported seeing several cars at the scene, a black custom pickup truck, a black Cadillac, and a green Cadillac with spinning rims. He said he had previously seen the Cadillac at the auto shop where Dwight McGhee worked. All right. So in January of 2004, Daryl Smith, who was now at that point serving a 30-year sentence in federal prison on drug charges, he was offered a deal in JC's case, which he was charged with murder in. Prosecutors told him unless he was directly involved in or responsible for JC's murder, they would reduce his sentence in exchange for information. Daryl spoke with a lawyer about the offer, but ultimately turned it down. What does that say to you?
I don't want to look too deep into it. It could be something where if Daryl's completely innocent, he's like, I can't tell you anything because I don't know. I truly don't know. Or maybe he spoke to his lawyer and he said, hey, lawyer, I don't think they have anything. And the lawyer said, yeah, I don't think they have anything either. Let's just keep our mouth shut because if you do talk, it's going to be even worse for you here in prison or even out on the streets because now you're a snitch and the people you're dealing with they're going to come after you. So it could be a lot of variables that played into the decision not to say anything to law enforcement. And for everybody, it's different.
Well, at some point, either in or before 2004, a grand jury was convened to determine whether Daryl could be brought to trial for JC's murder. However, during the proceedings, the charges against him were dropped and no one else was ever arrested. Now, when Madison spoke with the investigators, they told her that they simply didn't have enough evidence to take Daryl to trial.
So there's your answer. So, and maybe Daryl picked up on this and his attorney picked up on this where they said they don't have anything. They're trying to get something. If we just keep our mouths shut, this is going to go away. That's probably what happened.
Well, Madison believes that after the charges were dropped, the police saw the case as finished, not because it was solved, but because they considered it unsolvable. She described it as hitting a roadblock. Rather than trying to push through it, they just turned around. She also believes that investigators didn't think JC's case mattered to anyone outside of his family. Because of that, they didn't see it as important enough to solve. In her words, quote, they didn't think anyone would be protesting that this wasn't getting solved, end quote. And I mean, there's a million things, and I don't know if the police did this, but there's a million things they could have done. They could have gone to the site where Daryl claimed he and his girlfriend were camping to see if there was any evidence of a campsite there, any evidence that people had been staying there.
Look at traffic cameras leading to that location.
Looked at traffic cameras. They could have done, forensics and stuff on all of these vehicles to see if there was any forensic evidence there.
Cell phone triangulation.
Yeah, I don't know if they did this stuff. I really don't. Did they even talk to the neighbors? Did anybody have surveillance cameras that were pointing outwards toward that house? Like all of these things, I wonder if they were done.
And as far as actually cell phone triangulation, we're talking 2002. So I remember 2002, I was basically rocking a pager. Cell phones were not abundant at that point, so that might not have been an option.
Yeah, but they said that someone was using maybe a Nextel phone or walkie-talkies.
Yeah, it could have been right around that time because Nextels were used. And I remember when I was in college, a lot of people were using a Nextel. So it was still new. It's possible they had phones on them, but if anything, it probably would have been GPS. It would have been, like I said, just bouncing off different towers.
So obviously, nothing happens now. JC's murder went unsolved, and for a long time, Madison had no idea that her father had even been murdered at all because after JC was killed, Madison's mother obviously wasn't sure how to handle the situation because Madison was so young. So instead of telling Madison the truth, she told her that JC had died of a heart attack, which I completely understand.
I get it, yeah.
Yeah, she was like, I think 7 at that point. Like, what are you?
7 years old when it happened from what I have
what are you
going
to tell? What are you going to tell her? And then obviously that little white lie becomes kind of a secret as Madison gets older. But to keep that secret, Madison was kept away from her older sister, Alyssa. It wasn't until 2012, 10 years after his death, when Madison was 16, that she finally learned the truth. And it was devastating to hear, and she suddenly felt like her entire life had been a lie. But she was finishing high school and about to go to college, and for a while, she put that information aside. It wasn't until 2019 that she decided to start looking into what had really happened to her father. At first, it was just curiosity. She wanted to understand the truth. But the more she read through case files and listened to stories from people in the community, the more she realized that she needed to know what happened. And from there, she knew she had to do something about it. She started speaking with the police, who told her JC's murder was a home invasion gone wrong. But when she asked them to reopen the case and actually investigate, she wasn't getting anywhere. So she decided to take matters into her own hands, and that's when she started her podcast, Ice Cold Case, investigating the murder of John Cornelius McGhee. Madison has now spent more than 5 years investigating her father's murder, and through her research, she has developed her own theories about what really happened. Madison believes the home invasion was a cover for JC's murder, with the attack on Omar's family serving as a distraction. She thinks police wrongly looked at it as a robbery gone wrong, taking focus away from JC being the intended target. Madison also believes that Omar was used to lure JC into opening the door. She pointed out that her father wouldn't have unlocked the door at 6:30 a.m., especially with Alyssa sleeping inside, unless he thought someone he knew, like Omar, was outside. One detail that has always stood out to her is the fact that JC wasn't armed when he was killed. Madison said that to open the door, he would have walked past several guns. If there had been a stranger or a potential threat outside early that morning, she believes he would have grabbed one. But because he heard Omar's voice, he didn't feel the need to. And I agree with that.
I mean, not unless Omar's voice was distressed.
Yeah, but Omar's voice wasn't distressed. Because if he was like, Uncle JC, help me, then John would have had a gun.
That's what I'm saying. So we have to believe that Omar, under this scenario, is like, hey,
Is
JC,
in on it. Yeah.
come on out here. I want to show you
Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
Okay. But then the doors are kicked off the hinges, though. Remember that.
Yes.
John's apartment, he didn't open the door. So I'm saving it. I'm saving it, guys. I'm waiting. I promise.
All right. Another thing that doesn't sit right with Madison is how quickly JC was killed. He was shot once in the head from several feet away, and she believes that level of accuracy suggests intent. The fact that the first shot immediately killed him meant that the men didn't stick around. They left right away because they had accomplished what they came to do. They did not search his house for a safe, and they didn't even rob him of the chain that he was wearing. I agree.
That's
They
fair.
came all the way from California. There's $250,000 that they're after. And you're going to kill him and then be like, you know what? We've done enough for one day. Let's leave.
I see where she's coming from.
Now, Madison believes her father's murder was a revenge plot carried out because he was working with the police and had made enemies. But what she doesn't know is who was ultimately behind it. She wonders, was it the person directly who felt that they needed revenge? Or was it someone sort of behind the scenes, Wizard of Oz-like, orchestrating all of this? And she thinks that that will be revealed when motive comes into play. Madison is also uncertain about Omar's role in the murder. She pointed out that there is a 5-minute gap from when Omar goes outside with these guys to the time that Omar makes the 911 call. And she says she doesn't know if we'll ever know what happened in those 5 minutes, at least not from Omar. While she doesn't believe that Omar was the one who pulled the trigger, she knows that his constant lies and changing stories don't make him look good. When she has spoken to him, he's switched between angry that she's turned on him publicly and praising her for seeking the truth, saying that she is, quote, doing the right thing. Now, despite everything Madison has uncovered, police still insist that JC's murder was a result of a home invasion gone wrong and that Daryl Smith was involved. They tell her that the case is open, but she doesn't feel like they're doing much. For example, they once told her they wanted to re-interview Omar's girlfriend at the time, Kim, but they couldn't find her. However, as soon as Madison left the police station, she pulled up her Facebook and was able to contact Kim immediately.
Jesus. Horrible police work.
Now, Madison isn't sure if the police will ever solve her father's case or if she will either, and she's come to terms with that. For her, justice isn't necessarily about getting a conviction or seeing someone put behind bars. It's about knowing what happened to her dad. She told us, quote, I had to decide in the beginning, very early on, where my bar would be for some sort of peace. And I think just knowing, if I can get to a point where I'm like, all of this evidence lines up in my head, all of this makes sense to me, and this is what happened to my dad. Whether or not a court of law is going to convict someone, whether or not they're going to arrest someone or whatever, if I know that this is what happened and I can get this confirmed by the right people and the right witnesses and the right evidence, for me, I'm good. I did what I came here to do.
Yeah.
End quote.
That's great. That's great. I think Madison's an amazing person. That's why we agreed to do this. Met her multiple times, had some good times with her as well. It's not always doom and gloom talking about this. She's just a really amazing person. And she had actually known some people from Big Brother. That's how when she came up to me, she's like, hey, she's out in the LA area. She's like, I know this woman, Hannah, for all the Big Brother people. She knows Hannah Chada. That'll make sense to some of you, not a lot. So that's how we started. And then she got into her father's story. And she's gotten a couple nominations for this podcast, and she's doing a great job.
She's going to be at CrimeCon in Denver, too.
She will.
Yes.
She will be there. She will be there. I don't want to sound redundant, so I'm going to give my opinion where I stand right now without going over all the details that you just laid out. Because You have them here, and also you can go check out Madison's podcast as well. But here's the overview of what I think. The big headline for me is Omar is lying. We all know that. Omar is lying. The question is, why? So as we're going through all these scenarios, I got 3 that I think stand out to me. The first one is, it wasn't Omar and JC that these people were targeting. It was Omar and Richard. And I do think there's some truth to the idea that Richard stole a large sum of money, and these guys from Ohio or California, wherever they were from, knew the money or thought the money was being stashed at Omar or JC's house. And I don't think this was the first time that Omar, JC, Richard had been involved in something like this. Hence the high security, hence the safes, okay? Do I think Pearl was in on all of it? No, but as I've seen many times over the years, although she may not be directly involved, she's definitely turning a blind eye. She knows what's going on inside that house. She knows why there's so much security. So I think it's a real scenario, especially with all the names that are coming out and the consistency of those names. Daryl, Darren, Brandon, Richard, Omar, it's all the same people. And I think potentially the reason Omar was lying in the first place, because he knew, which you had alluded to, that at the end of the day, Omar and Richard are a big reason why JC's dead today. So in that scenario, they go to the house, they go to the main house where Omar is, they're looking for the money. Omar says it's next door. I can't tell you why the shooter did it, but I don't think this was a precision shot in that scenario. I think the person kicked in the door, was startled and surprised to see JC standing there, throws a shot, maybe it's blind, maybe he's looking right at him, and unfortunately or fortunately hits him in the head. Most of these low-level criminals are not lethal assassins. And unfortunately, sometimes, even with police officers, they just get lucky with one shot and they end up killing the cop. And it wasn't even an intentional shot. They just happened to get him in a good spot. So I do think that's a very plausible scenario, that they went there for a large sum of money that was allegedly there. They broke into one house. Omar maybe dimes out JC, and JC becomes collateral damage. Or, to not make JC look like just completely innocent in this, maybe JC knew about the money being stolen. Maybe he had some knowledge of that. Would that be completely out of the question? Absolutely not. The second scenario, which we talked about in episode 1, is that Omar set him up. JC had a lot of enemies. He's been involved in the drug game for a long time. He's snitching on people. He's doing his own thing.
And maybe Rico reaches out from prison and he's like, Omar, help me out, because they would be related.
They're related. They're all in on this together. And they say, hey, we want him. You're going to help me get him. You're going to set him up. We're going to come to your house. We'll toss some things over. We'll throw some alcohol on you. We'll beat you up a little bit. That's going to give you an alibi with law enforcement. It's also going to give you an alibi with the family. You're going to help us. Would it be the first time that family took out family? Of course not. That would go in line with what Madison's saying, that they intentionally went there. JC was the target the whole time. I just don't understand why you wouldn't go kill him first to make sure he doesn't hear the home invasion next door, and then go trample over some things, knock a table over, and just lie to police and tell them, oh, they came same time.
I don't know, because the timing has to be right, and because...
Dude, 4 minutes.
And because Kim and Pearl had to be kept in the dark, so they had to put on a show for them. That's where I'm leaning. I think, in my opinion, that Omar set his uncle up, and maybe he was forced to because he's got family who's behind bars because of JC, and they're like, hey, if it's not him, it's you, dude. So, figure it out.
It is. There's a lot of risk in that could have went bad for Omar as well, but it's also still plausible. And then the final one, which you kind of hit on there, which is Rico and all these other people that are in prison for a very long time and can't get to JC directly, but can get to him through other means and throwing some money out there. There's a world where Rico or one of these other guys hire a group of people who don't have a lot of money and say, listen, there's drugs, there's money in that house. No matter what, make sure you kill JC. I want him dead. I'm in prison. I want him dead. Maybe Omar's in on it, but also maybe Omar isn't. Maybe Omar's just collateral damage in this scenario where they're going there for JC. They don't know which house he's in. They hit both houses. Omar rats him out and says he's right next door because Omar's got a gun to his head. and they kill JC and get out of there because they were never there for the money in the first place. And when we talked to Madison, that was a scenario that she mentioned as well, where there's a lot of people who we haven't said directly by name in this story, but there are at least 75 people who know JC ratted him out. At least 75 who know that them being away from their friends and family is because of JC. So would they have an axe to grind? Absolutely. And some of them are in there for life, for what Madison was telling us. So could they have the means and the ability to gather a group of people to go out there and take them out down in West Virginia? Of course. So where do we stand on this one? For me, more than one person knows what happened here. I do think the truth is out there. A lot of loose lips, and they do sink ships. Madison, you have to keep digging, and I'm hoping that with the exposure you get here on Crime Weekly and other platforms, someone does come forward, whether it's for financial incentive or just wanting to do the right thing.
Or they just slip up.
They could also just slip up. They get caught and they come forward and they snitch because they're trying to get themselves a deal.
Well, apparently Madison's gotten, she hasn't said from who, but when she started digging in, she got some messages from a family member, and this family member was like, hey, you better stop looking into this or else.
I don't doubt that one bit. Because when you do get close, that's when the heat starts getting turned up. So I'm really hoping, and I love Madison's outlook on this, right? She doesn't know if there ever is going to be an actual prosecution. She just wants answers.
She just wants to know.
I truthfully believe, and I don't want to put words into her mouth. She can counter this if she wants to, but I truly believe that if someone came to her and said, hey, here's what happened. You're never going to get us to say it publicly, but here's what really went down. I think Madison would be good with that. I think she just wants to know. Now, would she still fight for justice for her father? Of course. But I think that at minimum, the uncertainty, the unknown is why a lot of us tune into these shows every week. We want resolution for these families. We want the answers to the puzzle.
Our brains want to make sense of something that's nonsensical.
Correct. Why would they do this? And there are a lot of suspects in this pool, but I do think it's already been narrowed down by law enforcement and by Madison. And I wouldn't be surprised in the least if within a very short period of time, there is a break in this case where Madison's updating all of us, letting us know, hey, someone is finally being charged with my father's murder.
Well, on that note, the third and final season of Ice Cold Case drops in April, and Madison is exploring new possible leads she's learned, including other confidential informants, family members, and more. So go check her out, send her some love, let her know we sent you.
Yes.
And let's all, give her our support in this journey that she's taking.
And thank you to Madison for allowing us and entrusting us to cover this. This is your story to tell about your father. And it's not easy to let someone else take control. She didn't ask to be part of the episode. She said, hey, come to your own conclusions. And I absolutely respect that. I think it's amazing. So thank you for entrusting us. We hope that we did a service here and we did you right, and you're happy with the outcome of what we've had to say. Weigh in down in the comments below. Let us know what you have to think. Make sure you go follow Madison. Any final words, Stephanie?
No, that's it. A very interesting case. I'm glad we covered it, and I'm glad that Madison is continuing to push for the answers that she needs. And I hope that she has all of our support, and I know she has our support.
Well said. Guys, we appreciate you being here. Everyone stay safe out there. We'll see you next week.
Bye.